Is Shunsui Bleach's darkest character? Everyone thinks of him as lazy and laid back, but his Bankai is one of the most emotionally heavy abilities in the entire story. And yet, his message in Thousand Year Blood War is also one of the most inspiring, as we see him grow from reluctant captain to protective leader, which is exactly why in this video, I'd like to examine Shunsui and Nanao's fight against Lily, discuss how it beautifully illustrates the complex relationship between expectations and personas, and explain how Shunsui shows us that heaven is other people. Which might sound weird or corny because the saying is hell is other people, and that's certainly the impression you get from the 4-part theater that Shunsui gives us. But when you go back and look at the scene prior to that Bankai, you get a somewhat different direction. Shunsui attacks Lily, who then explains that Shunsui's Shikai allows him to turn children's games into a reality. And while it's not in every one he plays, most of the games have to do with shadows and chasing shadows. While not immediately obvious, this theme of shadows is one that ties together this entire fight and the relevant flashbacks together. For example, when Shunsui uses his Bankai, we soon find out that it's a 4-part play about a man who hurts his partner, feels that same pain, feels shame for his action, agrees to jump into the ocean with his partner out of guilt, and is then killed by her when she cuts the thread of regret around his neck. Now, admittedly, this is the most abstract Bankai in all of Bleach, so there's many different ways to interpret what it might mean for readers. But what stands out pretty clearly is this relationship between the man and his partner. After the play, we see that Shunsui also has a partner, namely his Zanpakuto, Katen Kyokotsu. And in the play, there's this theme that no matter what happens, the man is bound to his partner. Funny enough, just like a shadow, something that no matter what you do, the shadow stays connected. So where we can see a connection between Shunsui's Shikai and his Bankai is this theme of shadows. More specifically, the role shadows play as a metaphor for the painful influence other people can have on us. Like a shadow, the man cannot escape his partner. He hurts her, but it only hurts him. The more he dwells, the more he feels shame. And even when he tries to run away, the woman's pity holds him back. So we can see how Shunsui's Bankai connects to his Shikai in that it illustrates this metaphor of shadows and people. But what does it mean? What is the overall message? And more importantly, what does it have to do with Shunsui's character arc and the rest of this fight? Well, this is where the whole hell is other people metaphor comes into play. But before I explain why that is, make sure to like the video if you're enjoying it so far. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it helps spread the video to other viewers like you. So with Shunsui's Bankai being so abstract, it's hard to really give it a definitive meaning. That being said, what comes after it tends to deliver a pretty strong suggestion. Shunsui thinks he has Lily beat. Interestingly enough, there's this exchange where it's revealed that he and his Zanpakuto swore they would die together. Considering the parallels between Shunsui's play and his relationship with Katen Kyokotsu, it could be argued this is meant to imply Shunsui, like his play, intended to die in this fight. It's certainly supported by Shinji, who compares him to Yamamoto, who died for the sake of the Soul Society. And when he's about to die, it does seem like he's giving in to his fate when he starts to fall asleep. From here, one understanding of Shunsui's Bankai is that it's an expression of his own understanding of his role as the Captain General. The man he looked up to since childhood died for the sake of everyone else. And we know Shunsui didn't want to be Captain General since he's not someone to take on more responsibility than he needs to. So in a way, his new responsibility, namely the expectations set on him by everyone in Soul Society, feels like a curse, much like the curse in his play. No matter what he does, he can't escape the gaze of everyone else. And regardless of whether he runs away from it or tries to accept it, this curse will be his end. This is where the whole hell is other people thing comes into play, a metaphor that's meant to illustrate the concept of how we as individuals can't seem to escape the perceptions and expectations placed on us by other people. But we run into a problem when Nanao enters the fight. because the message we seem to get is hell is other people, but this isn't what we see in Nanao and Shunsui's backstory at all. Shunsui explains that Nanao comes from a cursed family of priests. The family curse supposedly killed any man that entered into the family. So when Nanao's father and Shunsui's brother died, she gave her Zanpakuto to Shunsui so Nanao wouldn't live with that same curse. But then Nanao says one of the most important things in this fight. I'm certain the man I admire will think a curse is ridiculous. I have a feeling he's the kind of person who would simply laugh it off. By taking on the family Zanpakuto, Nanao gives us a different interpretation for the connection between people. By saying that the man she admires would laugh off a curse, she simultaneously implies that these expectations, these shadows, aren't really curses, while also helping Shunsui to face his own flaw. Prior to this exchange, the implication was that hell is other people, that because he was Captain General, Shunsui couldn't escape everyone's perception of him. But when Nanao says she looks up to him and says she's going to take on this supposed curse because she believes that's what he would do, Shunsui sees the error of his ways. It's no coincidence that Nanao's Zanpakuto, Shinken Hakkyoken, is a blade that can't cut its enemies, much like the thread of regret in Shunsui's play that could never be cut, or the shadows you can never escape. It's a blade that reflects the enemy's attack back at them. In this case, it reflects the light of God back at Lily, which is interesting because Lily told Shunsui that he was the last Quincy to get his powers, making him the closest to God. So ironically, in this discussion of expectations, Lily's light of God is really like a shadow cast on him by Yuha Locke. But what's interesting about Nanao's sword is that it literally cannot cut. It can only reflect the enemy's own image. What this does is force them to face themselves, and at the same time, it forcibly shows the enemy how other people see them. And that's the big takeaway. Because in the midst of this fight, we see a flashback to Shunsui visiting his brother. Nanao's mother shares her hairpin so the two of them can always be together. Shunsui points out that his brother seems kinder, to which his brother explains that if he seems that way, it's only because his wife's kindness makes him appear that way. It's immediately after this scene that we cut from the two hairpins on each character, then to the two of them in Shunsui's hair, then the chapter title, 2 Hairpins, 1 Shadow. So first of all, we see that this shadow thing is no coincidence, and it clearly ties everything together. But it also reminds Shunsui of the role that these shadows played in his brother's life. His brother was always harsh, but when he married his wife, her kindness made him want to be better. Likewise, Nanao's perception of Shunsui as an admirable man inspires her to accept her so-called family curse and be better than she is. When she does this, Shunsui is reminded of his brother and the kind of relationship he shared with his wife. As a result, he remembers why he decided to wear the kimono and 2 hairpins in the first place. Rather than a shadow that curses people like his play implies, the shadow cast by these hairpins is a shadow that blesses whoever wears them, and inspires the wearer to be the kind of person the other person sees them as. Hence why Nanao's Zanpakuto forces you to see how everyone else sees you. And it's at this point that we can finally understand Shunsui's greatest character flaw. When Nanao's mother was executed, he blamed himself because she entrusted him with her sword and was killed for it. When his brother dies, he doesn't want the responsibility, the expectations that come with his hairpin. He says, "Don't they know I'm not comfortable with responsibility?" Shunsui knows that people's expectations can feel like a curse, as being the object of someone's perceptions undoubtedly has an overwhelming influence on how you view yourself. This is why Shunsui is uncomfortable with responsibility. He doesn't want to lose the people around him, but he also can't help feeling as though their expectations of him are too much to bear. It's why he doesn't want to be Captain General. It's also why, when he finally meets Nanao for the first time, he hides his kimono and hairpins. He knows that if she saw them, she would realize he was the man her mother trusted and would expect him to be someone she can rely on. By hiding this, Shunsui reveals his flaw of avoiding the responsibility that comes with being a leader. But in this moment, when Nanao accepts the curse and he remembers the role his hairpins play as a shadow, Shunsui switches things up and becomes the shadow for Nanao. Suddenly, she goes from doubting herself and not being able to live up to the role of being a soul reaper, and she says the same thing her late father did. It's as if the captain's kindness is flowing into me. Nanao thought she would be the one to support Shunsui, but it ends up being the other way around, which is exactly what we saw before. Shunsui's shadow inspired Nanao to live up to the man that inspires her. Rather than a curse, his shadow serves as a blessing that inspires Nanao to live up to the same qualities she sees in Shunsui. And this is one of the most important takeaways from this entire fight. Shunsui's Shikai and Bankai seem to imply that other people's perceptions serve as shadows that we cannot escape. No matter what we do, we can't break that connection. Regardless of how much we try to hide, those shadows influence how we see ourselves. But by watching Nanao grow into the kind of person she looks up to, Shunsui is reminded that these shadows can be a blessing. It's precisely because our very presence inspires the people around us that we can be a constant source of inspiration and support. Like his brother and his sister-in-law, Shunsui decides to be the shadow that inspires Nanao in her moment of doubt. It's in this moment that Shunsui finds his own unique brand of leadership. Whereas he had always run away from responsibility because of its burden, he finally understands that the expectations of his peers can inspire him to be a better leader, while his presence also inspires them to be the kind of person they see in Shunsui. At this point, it's pretty clear that the more you look at this fight, the more complex it becomes. Which just goes to show how much thought and care Kubo put into Shunsui's Bankai and his character arc. While this can all be interpreted in many different ways, what's clear is that it's a profound discussion of the influence we have on others, and how that shadow we cast can ultimately inspire everyone else as well as ourselves. By viewing Shunsui's growth into a leader who supports his peers as a shadow, we learn that there's more value in being alive and present for those we care about than dying in some vain attempt to escape their gaze or even live up to it. This is why Shunsui's inspiring darkness makes him a great leader, and it's also why he's one of the most complex characters in all of Bleach. But now I'd like to hear what you think. How would you describe Shunsui's character arc? How does he compare to other Bleach characters? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And if you'd like to join me for another discussion like this one, then make sure to check out my live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. In those live streams, I react to new manga chapters, as well as discuss other anime and manga topics. Also, make sure to check out my other Bleach videos in my Bleach playlist, which you can find linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.